Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. We have very active lifestyles. It's not all wandering the countryside aimlessly or scaring passing motorists. And we all love a good cup of joe. And there's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. Bold, robust, delicious. It's coffee that can wake the dead. With over a dozen different roasts and flavors, Deadly Grounds can satisfy the most finicky of coffee addicts. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
Persons under 18 will not be admitted.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another kick-ass episode of Still Toking with. Yeah, well, you know who I am, so I'm not going to introduce myself. But, as always, the man that loves to have the sunny side up, Mr. Jeffrey Mark.
Keep your sunny side up, up. That's all you get. Hey, we got an exciting show this time because I'm going to learn some new stuff I didn't know.
Ooh, something that you don't know?
I know. It was hard to find, but we've got two guests on who are going to teach me about the history of something in which I'm emotionally invested, but probably have very bad information. And I'm wondering if our other co-host, Jeff, knows more about this than I do. Hey, Jeff, do you know more about this than I do?
I don't know shit. No, I mean, this, I'll tell you what, this is insane. I'm looking forward to yapping with this gentleman here, and his publisher is joining us as well. So I'm excited about that. Let's just get right into it. And, I'm going to learn some stuff. I've already learned some stuff. I've learned some stuff that I really could care less about. But when you learn stuff, it's important, whether you want to or not. You know what I'm saying?
Are you fucking babbling already?
Well, the gummy's already kicking in.
Oh,
well,
All right. Okay.
It's a weed show, right?
Tonight it is, yes. Would you like to introduce the guests, please?
Sure. Is there a particular order? No. All right. Let's bring in Miss Chris Bennett and Kris Millegan. I think I said that name correctly.
Welcome,
Yep.
gentlemen.
Howdy, boys.
Howdy.
Here.
So we got 2 Chris's and 2 Jeffs. This ought to be a hoot.
There we go.
Oh yeah.
You guys are
Oh. Did he freeze
What
up?
happened?
Oh, I
Who's
think,
that?
I think Mr.
Yep,
Mark
Miss-
froze up. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
Mr.
anyways,
Mark froze up. Well, that's okay. Everybody else is still good. I guess he ain't gonna learn shit either. So,
go ahead.
Chris,
Which
Which
one?
one?
Chris B. How about we do it that way? All right. You don't look like a dude. Not that I usually go by appearance, that would have this kind of knowledge.
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of different looks over the years. I've been writing about the history of cannabis and religion for like over 30 years. There's 5 books, right? So I've accumulated a bit of knowledge over that time on it. But I'm definitely not your traditional academic. I was a longtime activist as well, and pursuing legalization and different ways. And but yeah, I'm happy to have my knowledge on the subject tested.
So,
Oh, nice.
my first question right off the bat is, what got you so deeply involved in cannabis?
Yeah, well, I smoked 50 years of smoking cannabis right here this year for me. You know what I mean? I started when I was 12 and I'm 62 now. But for a long time, it was just, something I enjoyed. I didn't really worry too much about legalization or anything like that. But in 1990, I found out about the industrial uses for hemp, how, we could replace all our old growth forests for paper using hemp and build houses from it, make fuel from it. I'm sure most of your listeners are well informed on the whole hemp thing. And around that time, I had a very powerful religious experience while using cannabis. And I tried to understand what that was. I thought, was that anything to that, or was I just tripping? And I thought if there was anything to it, then other people will have had some sort of spiritual experience with cannabis as well. And so I started collecting information on that as I promoted the industrial uses of hemp. And I started the first hemp seed food business in North America, actually, in 1990. But while I was doing all that stuff, we started reading up on it and collecting data on it, and led to articles. Articles led to books. Some books led to more books. And it's a really fascinating history. People think generally, when they think pot in the history, they think maybe they go far back as the hippies, or maybe a little further to reefer madness in the jazz age. But the reality is humanity has had a relationship with this plant for tens of thousands of years. For industrial purposes, there's evidence of hemp rope that goes back 25,000 years. We have evidence of hemp cloth being in use in Taiwan and in cattle hayak in Turkey going back 10, 12,000 years.
Yeah.
Ritual use of cannabis. Here we're talking intoxicating purposes. We have evidence from Ukraine, Romania, Spain, going back like 5,000 years, So this is a really, really ancient plant. Even the name cannabis, the root word for cannabis, canap, is thought to be Proto-Indo-European. Indo-European language is the language many of our modern languages split off from: English, French, German, and also ancient languages like Sanskrit and stuff.
Right.
And before the Indo-European language was developed, the term cannabis was already around for, they believe for millennia, you know what I mean? So Carl Sagan speculated it was our oldest agricultural crop. There's a lot of evidence to support that idea. So we have a really profound relationship with cannabis. And I think, a lot of our modern environmental and other cultural problems, even medical problems, are, related to our separation from this plant in a lot of ways. We're in the midst of a cannabis renaissance right now. Cannabis is revolutionizing things like medicine with the discovery of the endocannabinoid system, and offers all sorts of industrial benefits which can help us to heal this planet that's in so much peril right now.
Right. And definitely agree with you on that. I was doing some research, and I think it was 830 AD or 830 BC. I can't remember which one, but they found one of the oldest pouches made from cannabis in a burial crypt.
Yeah. Well,
so it's
also also cannabis. This green cannabis buds were also found going back about that far as well.
Yeah. I mean, shit. It's in Genesis 1:12 of the Bible, folks. I mean, you can't go back much further than that.
Of the biblical stuff, my latest book, Cannabis, the Lost Sacrament, is largely based around the discovery of this, the only Hebrew temple ever discovered, an 8th century BCE temple in Tel Arad, Jerusalem. And it was just like about the size of a little temple site, about the size of a broom closet, maybe 4 by 8 feet. Mm-hmm. And in this temple site, they found 2 altars. One had been used for burning frankincense, but the other had been used for burning cannabis resins. I'm talking like hashish. This is what the archaeologists involved found. They suggested this was hashish, not like raw flowers or anything like that. A refined cannabis product. And this was used as an oracular chamber to invoke the biblical God. There was an inscription on this site, the house of Yahweh. This was a temple of the Hebrews. And it was in here that cannabis was burned. And this is just a fact, you know what I mean? Like hard archaeological evidence. Anybody can check this out. Google Tel Arad and cannabis. If you don't believe me, you'll find all sorts of news articles about it.
So you mentioned Cannabis as the Lost Sacrament of the Ancient World, which is your newest book. And folks, this gentleman has multiple books out on cannabis in different forms and things like that. If you want to know more about it, check the show notes up above or down below, depending on where you're watching or listening to us. All his links to all these books are there, as well as his amazing publisher and author, the other Chris.
Chris,
getting confused there.
Wow. So
Chris,
I want.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, when you started doing your research, were you surprised how much information that was actually out there?
Initially, it took a while. There wasn't the internet back then, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was all library books and stuff. But I was impressed with what I could find. You know what I mean? Some things were listed in other cannabis books that were around. In Canada at that time, there was a complete ban on cannabis literature. You'd get fined for $100,000 for selling High Times or a bond. But at the library, there were still library books that dealt with history, and there was some books on historical role of cannabis, like Ernest Abel's Marijuana the Last 12,000 Years, which was a really good book at the time.
Okay.
And finding out about its role in like Zoroastrianism and the Islamic religions and things like that was really fascinating. But it took a while to really get to the meat of it. And a lot of stuff let's say this archaeological evidence I was just talking about, that's just, recent 2020, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
I've been writing and suggesting that there'd been a role for cannabis in the Bible for 3 decades before that archaeological came and proved that point via a linguistic theory by a Polish anthropologist and etymologist, Soma Bennett, who in the 1930s first suggested a Hebrew term, cannabosum, was the source of the anointing oil and incenses in the Bible. And she was right. This archaeological evidence proves this, almost century-old theory. So it's, it's pretty fascinating to see, but it's far from just like the biblical religions, and in Hinduism, cannabis is still used in honor of the god Shiva, who's the oldest continually worshipped god on earth. You know what I mean? And every year at Shiva Ratri and every few years at the Kumbh Mela, millions of people are partaking of cannabis in honor of this deity, and in many of the existing old world religions that are still around, such as like Taoism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Shintoism, you can find clear textual references to cannabis, and in some cases archaeological evidence as well to support those textual references. But I'm talking like textual references where this is clearly accepted as cannabis, not any sort of interpretation on my part.
Chris, and forgive me, guys, my computer just had a complete nervous breakdown, but I'm back.
Well, welcome back.
I'm back. Thank you. You mentioned a lot of places where they have now found all over. It's very rare for any one crop to travel that much, especially in ancient times. Do you know where the first, where was marijuana first a crop?
Well, they believe the Tibetan plateau is where the origins of the the pre-cultivated plant. There's a new paper out suggesting that China is the home of cultivated cannabis. But when we're talking China, it's important to note that maybe you've heard about these mummies that were found in China. There's been a few different archaeological discoveries in the last 20 years where they found mummified remains with cannabis. In one case, it was 2 pounds of cultivated female cannabis in a basket, and it was just female flowers and stuff like that. So they'd specifically taken it out. And we're not talking like stuff that you would make shirts from. This was like flowers with resins and a good considerable THC content. They found amongst the same culture another tomb with a bouquet of cannabis flowers, and then another tomb with raw female cannabis as well. And then they found about a dozen or more braziers that were used for burning cannabis in funerary rituals. But these people, although they were in China, they weren't Chinese, indigenous Chinese. They weren't Han Chinese, which I mean Oriental. They were Caucasian people, a Caucasian blend of people. They had other cultures and DNA mixed in with them, but they were Indo-Europeans. And they were in central China from about 2000 BC to about 400 BCE when the Han Chinese, the indigenous Chinese, chased them out of the region, right? So it's hard to say, these people were definitely cultivating cannabis flowers for intoxicating purposes, right? But it's hard to say, exactly who this origin of cultivation was, as far as whether Han Chinese or Indo-Europeans brought it there and the Han Chinese adopted it. There's a lot of unknowns there, but the region that is believed to have been first cultivated is China.
Okay, and my next question, and this is something I'd like to know, can you, without going into too much technical detail, contrast marijuana from hashish? Because I'm sure a lot of our friends who are watching and listening, they've heard of both, maybe they've tried both, but they don't know the difference. What is the difference?
Yeah, well, traditionally a hashish would be the trichomes, which is like the sugar-like quality you see on the flowers, extracted off either by rubbing it and getting those resins on your hand and then putting it into a ball, or by really having very dry cannabis and sifting it over a fine net that's lets the trichomes fall through but holds the leaf matter. There's other ways of preparation as well, but those are a couple of the more popular ones in the agent world. And when we get high off cannabis, it's because of those same trichomes, the sugar-like quality that's on the flowers, that really get us high. And so hashish is just that without less vegetation matter and more of the good sugar that people are really wanting when they use cannabis.
So for the good properties of marijuana, that there are healing and all those wonderful things, is hashish an equal, or is marijuana better?
That really probably depends on the ailment and things like that. I'm not an expert on medical cannabis, but there's CBD and THC and CBN and all these different things. And some of these are better for some ailments than other things. You know what I mean? And there's also the question of ingested versus smoked or inhaled. You know what I mean? A lot of people have been finding relief from the Rick Simpson oil, which is like a resin product produced by breaking down cannabis and alcohol or butane or some sort of thing like that.
Very high potency.
Yeah.
Also known as FICO, right?
And that's ingested, right? You know what I mean? But somebody suffering from something like epilepsy might find more relief from an instantaneous relief from inhaled cannabis. There's a lot of variables there, and probably better to interview a doctor about that than myself. But a lot of these medical applications go back into the ancient world and medieval period as well. Take epilepsy, which I mentioned already, and it's still considered a miracle by parents whose children are suffering by epilepsy. But in the ancient world, epilepsy was considered spirit possession by ancient people. And there's references to cannabis being used for hand of ghost in Syrian texts going back almost 3,000 years, which are believed to be references to epilepsy. And then in the medieval times, you say 16th, 15th, 16th century, the alchemist Paracelsus was also preparing a cannabis-infused wine for epilepsy. You know what I mean? And so this is like a lot of this stuff goes way back. It's thought to be that the oldest pharmacopoeia was written by, which is a book of medicines, was written by an emperor, a Chinese emperor, Shen Nung, going back like 2700 BCE, according to some sources. So that's pretty ancient stuff, right?
Right.
I would say that cannabis is the oldest medicine and religious sacrament.
So,
Right. Well,
having said all of that, because I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah.
Why is it in the history of Western civilization, liquor and liquor products always seem to be acceptable, accepted, accessible, except to the very, very, very religious who thought it was evil, and yet society has had this love-hate thing with cannabis? Why hasn't cannabis traveled the same path liquor? Why has it been?
Yeah, well,
Money.
we'd say the opposite thing over in the East, right? You know where I mean? Where there would have been like a copious use of cannabis and hashish in the Islamic world and bong and stuff.
No, I'm talking Western
The
civilization.
Western world. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's really cultural. I actually had another put on a conference some years ago, and I had another professor, a guy with a PhD, Dr. Michael Aldrich, who's a very good expert on the history of cannabis as well. And his whole presentation was on the alcohol using cultures versus the marijuana using cultures, and says that's the big split right there, and that the alcohol ones were the really warlike, aggressive invader type cultures, and the cannabis using ones were much more kind of a peaceful type of culture. But yeah, it's a cultural preference, it's like that's the way it went. Cannabis, I think, at the fall of, like, say, Roman civilization and stuff like that, a lot was going on in the ancient world. A lot of trade routes disappeared, a lot of upheavals, and that kind of broke a lot of contact with cannabis as well. And then the whole rise of Christianity, where any sort of plant medicine would have been considered sort of witchcraft or something like that for centuries. The only medicine allowed was prayer, so that contributed. And wine was a sacrament of the church. There wasn't any hard liquor back then, right? You know what I mean? It was all wine, beer, and stuff like that. And wine was a sacrament of the church. And so that really maintained its status,
And I want to throw something else in there for Jeff. My personal opinion, in the last 50, maybe 70 years, cannabis has been shunned down by the pharmaceuticals because of all of its healing properties. They want you to buy their
Addictive
drugs,
pills.
okay, instead of using cannabis, because I use it daily, you know what I mean, for pain. When I get too hyped out, it calms me down, so I use it for that. It's got so many uses. I don't want to take a fucking Adderall.
Right.
I want to eat a gummy.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I don't want to eat Motrin 800 and destroy my stomach. I use a lot of CBD,
oils,
whether it's topicals or the tinctures. But it works very well for my pain management. But I do want to throw a question at Chris M, because he looks like he's going to fall asleep up there in the corner on us. So, I know we've heard a lot from Chris B here about, his involvement in cannabis and in writing about cannabis. But I want to throw a question at you as a publisher and author yourself. how did you meet Crispy, and what is your involvement in the cannabis side of things?
Well, we were both writers for High Times, and that's how we first kind of met. I was writing about some of the political aspects. My daddy was a spook, and he told me some things one day with this professor, and I didn't understand him. And basically, because of that, I started researching a subject I call CIA drugs. Okay, and there's two sides to that. There's CIA drugs, the transport, and then there's CIA drugs, the MK Ultra type material. Mm-hmm. And we met at a cannabis, what do they call those? The Cannabis Cup. We were invited to a Cannabis Cup by one of the publishers there, and then he got fired in August. So by the time we get there, they're trying to turn High Times at that point in time. They're trying to take the weed out of it and turn it into some sort of a GQ magazine. It was a very strange Cannabis Cup because Chris and I were walking around, and these guys come up to us and they say, "What's going on?" And we said, "Well, this Steve invited us," and they said, "Oh, okay." So we were just kind of there, you know. It was very interesting, and then later on, I was writing about my daddy told me about these secret societies, and I didn't know what he was talking about. I finally figured out it was Skull and Bones, and I was trying to write some articles about it. Only High Times would print them, and then I sent, you know, you're a writer, you send letters around to publishers to see if they'll, you know, publish your stuff, and I only got one letter back, and it was from Adam Parfait of Feral House, and he said, "Well, gee, I don't think I'm ready to take on Skull and Bones," which really shocked me because some of the books that he had put out. And so I started thinking, well, I might have to do this myself. And that's what I ended up doing. And, you know, Chris, I mean, does Chris know his stuff, you know, about marijuana and the history and everything, you know? And so I said, you know, and he had some books and we did them, and you know, I've learned a lot because, I mean, he, you know, has not just looked at the ancient world. The Liber 420 shows the period in between in the Middle Ages and up to now, and how they buried the marijuana references by calling them other things. Okay, because marijuana has been around a long time. We did another book by a gentleman, Bandit of Kabul, and he would go up in Nepal, and he would go way up to the villages that were the highest up in the mountains. And when he got up there to those villages, everything was marijuana. I mean, their clothes, their houses, you know, I mean, everything was based around it. So, you know, I just found it very, very interesting, and I've thoroughly enjoyed publishing Chris's books because he knows his stuff. He does his research, and with, you know, when the internet came around, and, you know, all of a sudden, all these old books, okay, could be translated and could be read, and then the archaeological stuff has just been fantastic. Okay, yeah. So that's where Chris and I got together.
Yeah, I don't think you could write books like I wrote before the internet was around. You know what I mean? You just can do like a word search in Google Books and do 10 libraries worth of books, you know, in a simple search. On the cannabis and booze thing, I did want to say one really interesting thing is there's a meeting point there. Cannabis infused wines were hugely around in the ancient world, and this goes back to Spain. They found you know, a plate with residues of cannabis and wine on it going back 5,000 years. That was, you know, used in some sort of ritual. And amongst the Scythians, who are well known for their like burning cannabis in braziers inside tents, these guys also drank cannabis. They found golden goblets that had residues of cannabis and opium. So they were drinking cannabis and opium infused in wines. And the oldest sort of anesthetic is thought to be a cannabis infused wine used in China for operations and stuff, going back to the 1st century, you know. So, and these were used up and through medieval times. A lot of like alchemical things like quintessences and arcanums were infusions of plants into wines, and this was like a major product in alchemy. And cannabis was used in that context as well.
Right.
Well, it is considered to be one of the most versatile plants on the planet.
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
You know, because it can do almost anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you got, Chris and Chris, how much you researched Jeff and I, but we started we started a t-shirt business in the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, cool.
Based on, you know, hemp and cannabis.
Yeah.
And you speak of High Times, that was the only place we could sell our merchandise.
Yeah. I imported a lot of hemp cloth in the early 90s and stuff as well, and made hemp clothes and hemp hats and stuff. It's a shame that there's not more of it around. Although, you know, what's really taken off is the hemp nut. You know, once somebody learned how to dehull those seeds, you know, it's now like you find it in any grocery store, you know, and that's for me, that's really cool because, you know, like in 1990, I started a business, Mama Indica's Hemp Seed Treats, and I made kind of like a sesame snap type product with hemp seeds. And at first, I just started selling them, at events and things in order to raise money to print pamphlets and things. But then stores and stuff started asking them, and you know, after a while, I was selling them all over North America through wholesalers and stuff. And now, you know, to see it in stores and stuff, just plain Jane is, you know, the whole trip here in Canada with full legalization has been a trip to experience, seeing it go from.
That's what I use for soap. I use hemp soap.
Yeah.
That's what I use.
Right.
Yeah.
My skin likes it.
Well, I've been smoking for about 58 years. And one thing that I, you know, thought early on, I says, you know, there's more to this than just getting high. You know, there's way more to this plant than just getting high, you know. And so it's been a real journey to watch it, you know, from becoming, you know, completely illegal, you know, to being legal. And you know, one of the reasons why it was illegal, Jeffrey asked a question earlier on, it is about control, okay, because they use these, you know, the laws against it, okay, for control and also to make a lot of money, okay, because Skull and Bones was started by an opium smuggler, okay, and after the Second Opium War, opium became legal, okay, so you know, it took a while for, you know, some of these people in China to figure out, wait a minute, I don't need you smugglers anymore. I can just, you know, call up India and say, hey, send me a boatload. I'll pay the taxes and the duties. Okay. But after a while, they figured that out. And so the Sassoons and other people started making a lot of money. And then they, through a false flag and yellow journalism, they fomented the Spanish-American War. And to make a long story short, they sent in William Howard Taft, the son of one of the founders of Skull and Bones, Alonzo Taft, to be the first civilian governor. And if you look at the historical record, he wanted to be on the Supreme Court. Well, first McKinley asked him to be on the Supreme Court, and he said no. And then after McKinley was shot and Teddy Roosevelt was president, he asked him to be on the Supreme Court, and he said no. And then finally, Teddy asked him to be Secretary of War, and he said, okay, I'll be Secretary of War. My daddy was Secretary of War. And if you look at the historical record, one thing he did after, you know, saying, okay, I'll be Secretary of War and leaving was to make opium illegal for the first time in modern Asia, which means you need smugglers, okay? And then Taft started the Shanghai and the Hague conventions, okay, that gave us the prohibition of cannabis, coca, and opium. okay, because then it allows these people to sell plants for sometimes more than gold. And sometimes these plants in the right places, you can get them to grow 3 times a year. Okay, so you're making a lot of money and you've got this big slush fund that allows you to corrupt things.
Interesting and fascinating. May I play a respectful devil's advocate?
Sure.
Is that okay? I know that Chris Bennett's in Canada and Ben and Jeff are in Boston. I don't know where you are, sir. Chris,
Oregon.
Oregon. Okay, well, it's better for you. I live in the desert outside, Palm Springs. Out here, there is a dispensary about every 14 inches. And huge signs for places called like Dank de Pot and other cutesy things like that. There are sports marijuana smoking lounges out here now. Is there a point where it's too accessible, too much? Because I make a joke that in certain parts of the Coachella Valley, once you leave your house, just assume that everybody you find is stoned because so many people are. Is there a point? It would be like if everyone was constantly drunk, where it's too much smoking. Should there people be wise about smoking, or do you guys believe no, smoke as much as you want, it doesn't matter?
You should be wise. I mean, it's an arm bending thing. All arm bending things are kind of karmic, you know.
Okay, I want to throw something in here. My in-laws are from Italy. Okay, in Italy, it is customary on a regular basis to have wine during dinner.
Yes,
even the children.
Absolutely.
Okay, and Italy has one of the lowest alcoholic rates in the world because they see it every day. When you take people, especially young people, and you take something away from them, they just want it that much more. If you make it accessible,
Yes.
They may go through a little bump, but then it's not a big deal. It's right there all the time.
Right.
Oh yeah, I wasn't mentioning accessibility. I mean, I'm talking about use.
Right. So I'm going to weigh in on the usage part of it. It's just like anything else out there in the world. If you abuse it, then it's being abused. You can go have a glass of wine and not be an alcoholic.
Yes.
You can use cannabis for multiple different ailments or just recreational. But if you get up in the morning and you're smoking from the time you get up to the time you go to bed every single day, 24/7, 365, are you abusing it?
Yes. Because that was my life.
Right.
Well, I mean, I know people that do that. I mean, people
Right.
to the point where they hook the shit up to a CPAP machine if they could while they were sleeping.
Right.
Well, I had a joint rolled at my my night table there with a lighter, and in my eyes closed, I could feel over. Oh, here it is. And before I opened my eyes, I got stoned. I'm one of the people, the 10%, who have the ism, who have the compulsive personality thing.
Right. And I think that's
which is but please know, I absolutely support the use of cannabis and smoking for all the good stuff that it does.
Right.
Throwing away the baby with the bathwater is dumb. But for those of us who have the addictive gene,
well, right. And I think that's exactly how it is. If you have an addictive personality, you can be addicted to anything.
Exactly.
You know, and you might go from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, you know. But there are people, like I said, that wake up, you know, smoke all day long. But are they smoking all day long because they have cancer?
Of course.
Is it alleviating the pain? So there's different aspects, I think, to the whole realm of that question.
I think
I'm 75.
Is it making your life better or worse? You know, if it's not making it better, then take a look at it. You know what I mean? But you know, performance-wise, man, I've written all my books stoned. It's definitely, and you know, I surf and have skateboarded and stuff, and it's those type of sports, man. They're full of people that love to puff, man. At the highest levels of those sports, surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, man, the highest levels, man. There's people that are doing high performance stuff stoned. And that's a reality. And that's same with martial arts, man. It's not, people aren't just like puffing after MMA fights. There's a whole fight scene that's like based around cannabis use is a big part of it. You know what I mean? And they're fighting right there in the fights and stuff like that. So I find that, in those type of things, cannabis really helps you drop your like chatter and get totally present, for those types of sports. It can offer that. That's why guys like Bruce Lee were into hashish and stuff like that. They were well aware of that quality, that quality of cannabis. And
it can be used to relax and to focus.
Then fucking don't do it. You know what I mean? But I don't know. For me, I find cannabis is like really helps me get by in this troubled world, man. Deal with the pain of what's happening to our world and shit and politics and everything. You know what I mean? It eases that, and it also, I think, gives me an element of I don't know if occult would be the right word, but an element of the unconscious or subconscious it can bring up into awareness, and that's an element of esoteric awareness to daily life, even. You know what I mean? That's why people like sadhus and those sorts of people have always been drawn to it as well.
Kris Millegan, you wanted to say something, sir?
Yeah, well, I'm 75, and when I was a young kid smoking, one thing that came to me was, there's some sort of a shamanistic thing going on about the whole cannabis use. Okay, rather, like I say, it was more than just getting high. And then the other thing is, at 75, one thing that I found out is that aging is more debilitating than smoking pot. Okay, and whatnot. So that was my comment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anybody here because Chris B, you said you're in your 60s.
Yeah, I'm in my 60s. Yeah,
Chris, you're in your 70s. Jeff, you're in your 60s. Mr. Mark, you're in your 60s.
Yes, sir.
I'm in my mid 50s. So yeah, as we get older, shit hurts.
Yeah.
Like legit shit hurts. And it all depends on what you do for a living, as a younger person moving up into the, adulthood, as they call it, and into your golden years. I don't know why they fucking call them golden years, but
you're urinating all the time.
Maybe that's what it is, but like you said, I use a lot of CBD products. I mean, I'm a carpenter by trade, and everything hurts: knees, hips, back, neck, arms, hands, fingers, and the solves, they really do work.
That's why I support. There's so much good from cannabis. I couldn't thank you, Frank, for that. We just all of us got a compliment from Frank's Kennel Lounge. So another question. Do you differentiate as far as healthiness between smoking and ingesting?
Most of that vaporized. I have a Volcano, and I've used a Volcano vaporizer for like 25 years. I'm just smoking right now because I didn't want to fill up my Volcano bag. If I'm out, I'll smoke a joint. But the vast majority, I would say like 90% of the cannabis I consumed is vaporizing. I think, medical qualities probably you're going to get more, unless you're just looking for like pain, instant relief for something. I think you're going to get more out of ingested cannabis as far as like chemicals that are in cannabis and all the things like that. I would assume, as a medicine, it would be standardized and in that sort of a way and applied like any medicine,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I used to smoke an awful lot of weed. I don't smoke nearly as much as I used to. I still do once in a while. But I'll tell you what, this fucking weed in the last 10 years, it chokes the shit out of me. And honestly, I sneeze a lot. So I've turned more towards the edibles, and I prefer it. I just prefer that method now. It seems to work better for me.
I was asking for very selfish reasons. I stopped smoking at 30 because I'm an addict. No disparaging the marijuana. But despite stopping it, I have fairly severe COPD. And I have been told that part of the reason why I do, other than DNA and where I was brought up and stuff, is holding, you smoke marijuana the right way, you hold the smoke in your lungs. You don't just puff and blow out. And I was told by doctors that could be why asthma, that they think, doctors have told me, they support marijuana, they love what it does, the good, but they would rather see people ingest than smoke. I was just wondering, as experts, how you felt about it.
I get a hack if I smoke all the time. You know what I mean? Before the volcano, I'd often get a hack from it and stuff. But with the volcano vaporizer, my lungs feel really good and clean. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not like anything's in there. I'm not feeling any sort of runny stuff or anything like that. It's good. It's good. You know what I mean? And but I definitely think if you're smoking, it's carbon, man. You know what I mean? Smoke. And just the fact that it's smoke is not necessarily the ideal thing to be using all the time.
Kris Millegan?
Well, one of the main reasons I use marijuana is it keeps everything moving in the body, so it doesn't just stick around in one place. And then, when medical marijuana first came around, they had these meetings, and I went to one, and I figured I'm going to just see a bunch of hippie scofflaws there, and they were sitting around in a circle, kind of like an AA meeting, I guess, and they were telling everybody, okay, why they're here. And it just blew me away in that the story going around the circle was just over and over again, these heavy industrial accidents, really heavy car accidents, and stuff. And these people were saying, well, I can either be on these very heavy drugs and, barely function, okay, or I can smoke a little pot and just use a little bit of the heavy drugs, or smoke pot and not use any of the heavy drugs, So, I mean, cannabis, marijuana has a place in our world, okay? It's one of the oldest, cultivated plants out there. I mean, there's people that say that, the stuff, there really isn't any wild marijuana out there. All the marijuana out there is stuff that's gotten out of somebody's garden, okay? Because it's been around man for as long as recorded history.
Yeah. And it'll grow fucking anywhere.
It's a weed.
Yeah.
Yep, it'll grow fucking anywhere.
Can we talk about the culture of it a little bit, which I also find fascinating? So is it true that the 420 term comes from a police signal, a police code for it, or is that bullshit?
I've heard too many stories.
There's so many stories, you know what I mean? Another one is like there's kids that would meet at 420 after school, and they started it, and that's probably the more well-known one. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of come out of nowhere. There's some really weird synchronicities there. H.P. Lovecraft, he has some story about this plant he describes, and it sounds like marijuana buds. And this guy, he tries it. I forget what they call it. And he said, I looked at my watch and it was 420. And it sounds totally like, and that was back in the 30s, And there's other weird synchronicities like that, but I think they're just kind of like coincidences. But it kind of just came out of nowhere, man.
The other cultural thing is when I was young, back when dinosaurs were roaming the world, if you called marijuana pot, you were the biggest square in the whole world. We called it weed. We called it grass. Nobody I knew of my generation ever used the term pot. And today it's almost the only term people use. Have you noticed that? Was that part of your youth?
I think it depends on where you are too. Because
I didn't.
Up here in the Northeast, it was always weed.
Yeah.
And in the New York area, it was grass.
But it wasn't until like 1990 that I heard the term hemp, as I knew that was cannabis. You know what I mean? Right. It had been forgotten, and that was like a common term for it for a long time. It had totally gone out. If you'd already been smoking cannabis for 20 years by then, I'm sure. And so it was the first time I ever heard it. And
we knew about it being up here in the Boston area because that's why Cottage Park got shut down.
Yep.
Because they were a rope manufacturer.
Right.
And they made hemp illegal.
Hemp rope. Yep.
And they made it out of the hemp,
Yep.
and then they couldn't get it no more. Shut the entire place down.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Yeah, that's right here in Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Nice.
America's hometown.
Yep.
I'm in Nova Scotia, so I'm over on the East Coast as well.
Right. So sorry, I'm watching comments and stuff coming in, and
They call it weed, unless you're in the city, and they call it some weird ass shit.
based off the price.
When I first started smoking weed, though, it was all called commercial. It was just like a big bag of leaf. It wasn't any buds, you know what I mean? This is like, say, 1974 or something. And then a few years later, we started seeing Colombian, and then it would come all these brown, seedy buds.
Right.
And then there was this red hair, and that was the new good stuff. Which
And
would
then-
be
High stick and Maui Wowie and all that stuff.
started coming, but it wasn't until the 80s that I started seeing the good quality bud being grown here in Canada, where people were growing the indoor.
But I mean,
Back in the day when I was in high school, it's like if you could find weed that was green, thumbs up, because everything was fucking brown and brick.
Yeah.
And full of seeds.
And think about that now. If we had saved our seeds, we'd all be billionaires.
I don't know, because most of the weed was garbage back then.
Yeah, it'd have to be good seeds. Maybe if you had some like Thai stick or something. And
Even the term a lid, very West Coast. On the East Coast, you bought an ounce or you bought a dime bag. On the West Coast, you bought a lid. I find the culture of marijuana fascinating. I always have. This is not a new
I
interest.
think cannabis is only second to sex for the most different names that it has. It's likely that's the fact.
That is true. So, and I just want to reiterate real quick again to all our viewers tonight, anybody viewing this later or listening to this on podcast later on, if you wanted to know more about Chris B or Chris M, check the show notes up above or down below, depending on where you're watching or listening to us. All their links are there. All the links to Chris's books are there. He's got some we really didn't get into a lot about your books today. It was just more of like a social circle chat. But there's some really interesting facts and knowledge in those books, folks. So, okay, back to, we got about 10 or 15 minutes left. So.
Yeah, I got a question I want to ask.
Who?
Chris B. It was in the book. In 1990, you said you had a revelation or a synchronization of events. Yeah. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that was my religious experience. Okay, I didn't want to take up a lot of time on the show with it, but I'll go over it. So,
well, I'm curious. I'll tell you what happened. Yeah.
It was a series of events, and one of the first things was there was a big controversy about the Catholic Church here in Canada when orphanages from a orphanage, which was right not far from where I'm at now. I used to live on the other side of the country. They were molesting kids that were in the orphanage. This was the first time, this was in the 80s, the first time people really started talking about the situation with priests molesting kids and shit. And I was like, well, that's really weird. I thought these people were into the Bible. I'm going to read the Bible. And I bought a Bible. At that time, I was a surfer living out on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Had a job as a night watchman at a fish plant. I'd read a lot at night, brought the Bible in there, started reading it, and it was like so-and-so begat so-and-so, and I was like, this is crap, stuck it aside in my night watchman office. Then coinciding with this, there started being a real controversy about the logging of the last coastal old-growth rainforest, Clackwood Sound. And my brother was a logger. I'd worked in the forest industry as well, and all of a sudden protesters from around the world were showing up. And then coinciding with this, I saw this documentary on hemp in 1990, and it talked about all the industrial uses. And I was like, well, we could fix this logging problem and keep jobs if we, convert to hemp. And I started thinking somebody's got to start doing something about that. Another event that happened was the Gulf War started in Iraq, and Saddam had fired a Scud missile into Israel. And because of this, people were comparing him to a figure in the Bible, Nebuchadnezzar, who was the last king of Babylon and destroyed Israel. And so one night I'm in the fish plant smoking weed that I grew, about 3 a.m. in the lunchroom. And I'm reading a newspaper. Back then, all TV stuff was in the newspaper, right? And there's an advertisement for a sermon by Pat Robertson. It's Revelations 18, the fall of Babylon. And behind him, he's got picture tanks and jets. And so I was like, whoa, that's weird. They're tying in this Gulf War with the book of Revelation, and I'd seen The Omen when I was a kid, and there were Jehovah's Witnesses in the fish plant talking about apocalypse stuff often, and so I thought, I'm going to read the book of Revelation right now. So I got the Bible out and I started reading it. And at the beginning of the story, John the prophet's given the scroll and he eats it. Tastes as sweet as honey in his mouth. He swallows it. It turns bitter in his stomach. And then he begins to prophesy. And I'm like, well, what did he eat? And then it gets a little further. And it says they're all wearing sackcloth and they were given much incense to offer. And the smoke contained the prayers of the incense and the billowing smoke, and I'm like, well, this is trippy shit. And I got to the very end of the Bible, Revelations 22, and it says, on either side of the river of life stood the tree of life, bearing 12 manners of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. And when I read that, I swear to you, man, I can still feel it. 35 years later, a light just came inside of me and said, this is that tree of life, man. This is that plant. The fruits of the tree are the industrial uses you can use to save the planet, to save the trees, to replace the oil. The leaves are the medicine that can heal so many things, cancer, asthma, glaucoma. So many people out there know this from experience, And the healing of the nations, man, this is like a plant that is in all the religions. It is in all these different things. And this is that plant, man. This is that plant.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Agreed.
All right.
Agreed.
Glad
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked that. I wanted to ask that. I read it. I read the whole thing, so I basically knew what was going on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear your explanation of it. That was fantastic.
No, you didn't.
Well,
You just wanted to.
I don't think Revelation's a book of prophecy. I think it's more like it's in the collective consciousness that it's gotten out of there, and that what I had when I felt that light, it was like a remembrance of the species. You know what I mean? Like you
had what I call that an epiphany.
Yeah, an epiphany.
Yeah.
An epiphany.
Yeah.
And not my epiphany necessarily. I'm sure other people had similar types of experiences.
Yep.
With
Yeah. In Revelation, you have Armageddon, which is World War, and then you have the apocalypse, which basically means making everything known. Okay, so I'd rather see apocalypse than Armageddon myself.
Yeah, the unveiling.
Right.
What I've been trying to bring about, but limited success.
Chris, you've written so many books on this subject. Is there more for you to write about? Do you have something like you're forming a new book about the subject?
I probably got enough stuff to write another book about some of this occult stuff, but I don't know. We'll see. And I could probably revisit a lot of the stuff I wrote about Christianity, which we didn't really get into. Stuff like that. But I don't know. Right now, I'm just happy to be living and surfing.
Amen.
Right.
Oh,
Right. And like I said, folks, you can find out more about the stuff that we actually didn't get into tonight just by picking up one of his books. The links are in the show notes. The links are in the show notes. I mean, his blog's in the show notes. Chris M's stuff is in the show notes. We just give you the tip here. You've got to do the research, folks.
which so let me ask you, Chris B, if somebody wanted to purchase one of your books that knows nothing, that just wanted to be starting to get educated, which book of yours would you recommend?
If you want an all-round kind of historical study of ancient world, Cannabis and the Soma Solution, if it's Magic and Occult, Liber 420, and if it's the whole biblical stuff, Cannabis Law Sacrament.
So there you have it, folks. No
Very
excuses.
good.
No excuses. I mean, Jeff and I have been around the cannabis industry for a long time, but deep into the cannabis industry for about 6 years. We started a novel series where we were actually using it as medicine to cure zombieism because nobody had ever done it. It was a fun way to help break the stigma, and it actually fucking blew up. You know, it went from the novel series to a comic book series, and we started doing a live TV series. We just released our first animation.
Oh, nice.
And then this show, you know, the talk show was produced from all of that because, you know, COVID hit and everybody kind of hunkered down, and we were like, fuck, what are we going to do? You know, so we started filming and started the show.
Nice.
You know, so there's many ways for people to get involved in trying to help break that stigma.
Yeah.
But definitely pick up one of Chris's books.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, for sure. Man.
Chris M, as a publisher, do you only publish this sort of thing? What is your passion as a publisher?
My passion is to get books that New York and other places will not publish. That's basically how I started, because nobody would publish what I was writing about, and so I publish a lot of I think very, very interesting books, and books that don't get published. Okay, I mean, I wish we could say that, you know, I've made Chris Bennett rich, but I haven't, you know, because you know, we've sold some, but not a great amount. I mean, one thing I found is that, you know, you can become a demagogue pretty, you know, if you just want to make noise, okay? But if you just want to try and tell the truth, basically, the powers that be just ignore it. They just completely ignore it, because if they have to talk about it, then somebody's talking about it. So they basically, you know, ignore what we do.
The vast majority of books in the last 10 years have been printed in China. Is current politics going to bother your printing, sir?
No, I print in the Midwest.
Good for you. Yay.
Yep. And Jeff and I print out of the Southeast.
Mm-hmm.
And I still write cursive. So, sorry. I had to be silly for half a second.
Just a half a second? Oh my goodness.
I think Chris M, it's terribly important that publishers like you thrive and provide a place for authors who wouldn't, for whatever reason, get supported by mainstream publishing. It's terribly important now more than ever. So I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you. You know, I mean, it wasn't something that I was looking to do, but I've been a musician, and so when you do music, a lot of times you have to do other jobs and things like that, and you know, it just kind of seemed to be the thing to do, and because books are just wonderful things, you know. I mean, they just kind of sit there silently, okay, until somebody picks one up, and they open it up, and you know, books change people's lives, you know.
Yeah.
Well, as the author of several books, a couple of which were bestsellers, yay!
Right, and you know, kudos to you, Chris M, for being that type of publisher that, you know, will help people publish the stuff that New York and those people won't publish, because you never know. It could be a silly story to somebody, but really change somebody's life on the other end. You know?
Absolutely. Yep.
So just, you know, before we get too far past time, plug your publishing house. You know.
Well, it's Trine Day, and you can find it at trineday.com. We've got about almost 200 titles. Okay, covering a lot of subjects, and I'm proud of it too. I mean, there's some really good ones here. You know, Chris is I mean, Chris knows his stuff so well, and has done the diligence and done the research, and you know, and can tell people about it in a way that they understand it. Okay, and it's a you know, subject, because the plant's been around for so long that there's a lot of stories about it. There's a lot of information about cannabis. Okay, cannabis is you know, been around forever, and it has affected time as it has gone through.
I did go through your site actually earlier today, and one thing that I noticed was that all the titles that I was seeing, none of them fit the narrative, which is one thing that I really, really liked.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's no, it's not a romance novel. It's not like that kind of stuff. I think you said you started this in 2000 to get more circulations for books that are suppressed.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just a fact of life. Things are suppressed. Okay, there's quote unquote powers that be that would like to control most everything. Including ourselves and our children and our future. So my agenda has always been our children's future.
Right.
Because look at the crap we put up with. Just imagine the stuff our kids might have to put up with.
Very true.
Chris M., are your books available in a store or on Amazon, or must they go to your website to get it?
Oh no, we've got a good distributor, and they're available on Amazon and in bookstores.
Excellent.
There's not as many bookstores as there used to be.
No kidding.
But,
no kidding. It makes it very hard for authors to get out there and do book signings and have events.
Guess how many books are coming out each year right now?
I couldn't. Would you please tell me, Chris?
4 million. Okay, in North America in English. Okay, a year. Okay. I mean, and with AI, it's just going nuts because people are just, people are making AI books one a day. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got to stop that shit.
Yeah. Whoa. Yep. I mean, I still handwrite on paper.
No, I type in a computer, but
I handwrite it on paper first, and then I type it into the computer, and then I send it to Jeff as one long fucking sentence for 200 pages.
Well, see, I mean, the personal computer has allowed me to be a publisher. Okay. Right. And the internet has allowed, people to find out about us. And it's my contention that's part of the dynamic that is going on. Okay. I mean, you've got sheep goat herders in Kenya, okay, with a smartphone, okay, that could be watching this. Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know if you guys know the projection of this actual show, but we run on 33 platforms simultaneously worldwide.
Nice.
And we reached interacted with 97,000 last month with a 1.7 million reach.
Wowie zowie.
Yeah.
So when you say a goat herder in Kenya, we've had people log into the comments from some really, really weird places.
Right. So
Chris B., I have an idea for you, and I'm being serious. Your next book, why don't you talk about the last 100 years and like cultural stuff? What the names it was called and how people got it, and remember carburetors were supposed to cool down the smoke, but you stuck your joint in. I think
toilet paper rolls, you mean?
No, weren't those steamrollers?
I think there's a book in that, Chris B., and I think you're the guy to write it.
And I think Chris M's the guy to publish it.
Yeah.
So on that note, we are over time a little bit. I don't want to keep you guys too long. So Jeffrey Mark, any last questions for our guests?
Golly, Chris B. is so eloquent when he speaks about this subject. I don't know that I have any questions other than I'm happy to have met you, and I'm glad that I can support what you do even though I'm an addict, and I'm glad that you didn't give me any pushback because I'm an addict, that there was mutual respect and understanding. That makes me very happy, especially in today's world.
My only issue is when people want to put me in jail for it. You know what I mean? It's not to me for other people to smoke it.
I don't want to do that at all.
That's a good start.
Jeff?
Yeah. Do you do events, signings, that kind of stuff?
Chris B or Chris M?
Either one of you.
I do a lot of stuff like this. I kind of I've done lots of conferences, but I don't really do it that much anymore. But Chris probably does more stuff like that than me.
But what about signings at dispensaries and stuff like that?
I lived in Vancouver and I had a shop right downtown. I shared a space with Mark Emery's shop, and so I had a lot of, when I was there up until 2020. I was pretty available for that type of stuff, but now I'm living in the middle of nowhere on the East Coast, and not a lot of culture like that around here. Although there's a lot of people that smoke pot around here, everywhere in Canada, but there's not really too much of a call for anything like that.
Well, because me and Ben, we do a good number of cannabis events every year. Actually, in a week and a half, we're heading out to Steel City Cannabis Convention
in Monroeville, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so I didn't know if that was anything that you would be interested in looking into to try and get your books out there into the public eye, because it's one of the best ways is to
probably would, but I just
get in their face. I get you
and all that type of stuff so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent.
All right. Nice. And my last question for you is: are you a cat guy or a dog guy?
I'm both. I got a cat, a dog, and a parrot. And I love them all. I'm definitely an animal guy. I'm really into animals.
Very cool. Very cool.
I didn't expect a parrot, but that's kind of cool.
Right.
I was back with them with my wife for 6 months, cat, dog, and parrot, and traveled all around, and then they got out and they refused to get back in.
Nice. And Chris M., it's been a pleasure. Same question to you. Are you a cat guy or a dog guy?
We have both, and we've had a parrot too. But,
oh, geez.
Yeah. And I'd gladly help you with some books. Get some books to these events. And you can send the money to Chris B. That'd be wonderful, because I do a JFK event every November, it seems, down in Dallas. But the older you get, the less you get around,
That is true.
I'm hip, baby. Yep.
Very good. All right.
So let's we'll go Chris B. Where do you like interacting with your fans on the social medias?
You can find me on Facebook or Instagram or Blue Sky, or you can just search my name in cannabis in Google or YouTube. You get lots of stuff, lots of lectures, lots of articles, all that type of stuff's out there and pretty easy to find.
Very cool, folks. You heard it here. Make sure you check the show notes. Chris M., same thing. If you want to interact with your fans, where's the best place they can find you on the socials?
I'm on Facebook, both as my Kris Millegan and as Trine Day, and then we're on Instagram and a bunch of those others. I mostly sit in front of a computer and make books.
Well, there you go.
Hello, it's me. Yes. So Jeffrey Mark, where do you interact with your fans? Well, I'll be happy to tell you. Jeffrey Mark on Facebook. Jeffrey Mark on Facebook. Jeffrey Mark Showbiz on Instagram, or you can Google me and look up all my. There's have several days open if you Google me, because there's a lot of stuff out there. 51 years doing this, and I answer everybody. So you reach out to me, I answer you happily. Jeff.
Nice. I'll look you up, Christopher B. Just so that we can connect on the. I use Facebook. I don't use any of that other crap. Anyway, don't good luck searching Jeff. If you don't know who I am, you ain't gonna find me. Just go to stilltoken.com or Token with the Dead on Facebook. You'll find everything you need to know about us. Our YouTube channel, Still Token Productions. That you see the animation there, the episodes. I think there's over 700 videos on that on YouTube right now.
Like that. something like
Yeah,
that.
it's getting fucking insane. So but other than that, happy Wednesday, everybody. This was a great show. I want to thank Chris and Chris for being here.
Well, thank you, Jeff and Ben.
Yeah. Jeff and Ben.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we definitely want to thank Chris Bennett for coming out and talking about his passion for cannabis and all the amazing things he wrote in the books, in the show notes. Not going to get into it again. We want to thank Chris. Is it Millegan?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't fuck that up. For coming out, spending some time talking about his side of what he does, how they met. The flashy man himself down here in the corner, the voice in my fucking head over there. But in all seriousness, folks, we want to thank all our veterans and first responders for doing what they do, so people like us can come up here and do what we do. Stay safe. We'll see you next week. We're not out of here.
God bless and have a happy.
Oh, there's the button. Bye.
Peace.